You know, when you think of Manchester, you probably think of legendary music, or maybe those epic football rivalries. But this is a city where the atom was first split, a place where the modern world as we know it was literally forged in fire and steam. This is the story of Manchester, a city that has, time and time again, completely reinvented itself, and in doing so, reinvented the world. So, how on earth did it happen?
That's the big question, right? How does a cold, wet, remote frontier outpost stuck at the edge of an empire somehow become the very heart of a global revolution? Well, to figure that out, we have to go way, way back to the very beginning.
So let's rewind the clock. For its first, 1700 years, Manchester's story is, well, it's a story of really slow, quiet, and frankly pretty unremarkable growth. But this is the foundation, right? The bedrock upon which everything else was about to be built.
What's really striking is just how ordinary Manchester was for so long. I mean, it kicks off in 79 AD as a Roman fort, Mammicum. The Romans leave, and it kind of just fades away. 1,000 years later, you've got the Doomsday Book, and Manchester is barely a footnote. It slowly, very slowly, becomes a little market town trading wool. By the 1650s, it's a respectable place, sure, with about 5,000 people. But special? No way. Not yet.
And then, this. This is the moment it all changes. In the 1700s, cotton fabric from India suddenly becomes the absolute height of fashion. It's light, it's easy to wash, and crucially, unlike wool, Britain can't just make it. It has to be imported. And that one simple fact sets the stage for a revolution that is going to create wealth beyond imagination and suffering on an almost unimaginable scale.
What happens next isn't just growth. It's an explosion. Manchester transforms from a sleepy market town into something the world had never ever seen before, the very first industrial city. They nicknamed it Cottonopolis, and it was built on a brutal global system.
Okay, and we absolutely have to be clear about this. You can't talk about Manchester's rise without understanding its direct connection to the slave trade. It was fueled by this triangular trade. British ships would sail to Africa with manufactured goods, trade those goods for enslaved human beings, ship those people across the Atlantic in the most horrific conditions imaginable, and then come back to Britain loaded with raw cotton, all picked by that forced labor. That system powered the entire city's economy.
And right at the same time, you get this perfect storm of technology. First, you have these incredible new inventions, like the spinning mule that let one single worker do the job of dozens. But these things were huge, way too big for a cottage, so they needed new buildings, factories. And those factories needed a new power source, steam. So suddenly, these enormous, multi-story cotton mills start shooting up all over the city, and they create a whole new way of life and a whole new kind of city.
Now, if you were a mill owner, this was progress with a capital P. But for the hundreds of thousands of people who flocked to the city looking for work, it was often a living nightmare. The human cost of becoming Cottonopolis was just absolutely staggering.
25. Just let that number sink in for a second. In the 1840s, that was the average life expectancy for a laborer in Manchester. 25. People were crammed into these filthy, crowded slums with zero sanitation. Kids, as young as 5 years old, were working 14-hour days inside these dangerous mills, their little lungs just filling with cotton dust.
A young German man, Friedrich Engels, actually came to work in his father's mill in Manchester, and he was completely horrified by what he saw. He started walking the slums at night, documenting every little detail. The book he wrote was this absolutely searing indictment of the whole system. And his work right here in Manchester, alongside a guy named Karl Marx, would go on to help shape the ideas of communism.
So, surrounded by all this squalor, people started to demand a voice. Manchester was now this massive city, but it had no members of parliament, no representation. So on August 16, 1819, more than 60,000 people gathered peacefully to demand reform. The local magistrates panicked. They sent in armed cavalry who charged into the unarmed crowd. The result was a massacre, which people bitterly nicknamed Peterloo. This was the British state literally attacking its own people for asking for basic democratic rights.
So you have these workers in Manchester. They're exploited, they're brutalized, they're denied a voice. But in the 1860s, they were faced with a choice that would come to define the character of this city forever. So what happened? Well, the American Civil War breaks out. The Union Navy blockades all the Confederate ports, and just like that, the supply of raw cotton to Manchester stops completely. The mills all shut down. Hundreds of thousands of workers lose their jobs overnight. The city is plunged into a devastating famine.
So then, Confederate diplomats show up with a deal. They tell the starving workers, look, just pressure your government to break the Union blockade, and we'll make sure the cotton starts flowing again. All they had to do was support a state built on the foundation of slavery. I mean, can you imagine that choice? End your own family's starvation or stand in solidarity with enslaved people an entire ocean away.
On New Year's Eve, 1862, thousands of these starving workers gathered in the city, and they made their choice. They wrote a letter to President Abraham Lincoln, and in it, they declared their support for the cause of abolition. They chose to continue to starve rather than to be complicit in human slavery.
Lincoln was so incredibly moved by their sacrifice that he wrote back to them personally. He even arranged for ships full of food to be sent from the U.S. to help. He called their decision an act of sublime Christian heroism. It was this incredible moral stand that echoed all around the world, and there is still a statue of Abraham Lincoln standing in Manchester to this day.
After the World Wars of the 20th century, that massive textile industry went into this long, slow decline. The city that basically invented the modern world was suddenly being left behind by it. But this is Manchester we're talking about. And as always, it found a way to reinvent itself.
Just look at this shift. It's wild. The city's whole economic engine just completely transformed. The old Victorian warehouses and the decaying cotton mills, they all found a new life. The reliance on textiles just falls off a cliff, and it's replaced by this booming new economy built on tech, media, finance, and education.
The new Manchester wasn't forged in factories anymore, it was forged in culture. The city's sound, from Joy Division to the Smiths to Oasis, it just took over the world. Its 2 football clubs became these global mega brands. The BBC moved major operations here, and the huge student population just made the city feel young and vibrant and totally forward-looking again.
And there's one symbol that I think captures the spirit of the city perfectly. It's the worker bee. It was first adopted back in the Industrial Revolution to represent the tireless, hive of activity work ethic of the people. But after that horrific terror attack at the arena in 2017, the bee took on a whole new meaning. It became this powerful symbol of the city's unity, its defiance, and its absolutely unbreakable community spirit.
So how does a Roman fort become a blueprint for the modern world? By being constantly, relentlessly, and unapologetically itself. The industries change, the buildings change, from cotton to computers, from factory grime to global glory. But the actual character of its people? That seems to remain constant. Resilient, innovative, and defiant.